The year is 2035. You're walking through Rome. The Colosseum still stands. The espresso still tastes incredible, but something feels wrong. The piazza is full of tourists but empty of Romans. The shop selling leather goods isn't owned by an Italian family anymore. It's a franchise. The apartment buildings have for sale signs in Mandarin and Arabic. You're not visiting a civilization. You're visiting a museum. A beautiful, expensive museum where the exhibits are dying and nobody is coming to replace them. This didn't happen overnight. This was a choice. Actually, 6 choices. 6 fatal wounds that are bleeding Europe dry. And if you think I'm being dramatic, just look at the numbers. In 2008, the European Union and United States had roughly equal-sized economies. Today, America's at 27 trillion. Europe barely crossed 17 trillion. The gap between them is now larger than the entire economy of Japan. How does a continent with the best healthcare, the deepest history, and the highest standard of living fall so far so fast? It wasn't bad luck. It was suicide. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to dissect exactly how Europe killed itself, and why the rest of the world should pay attention. Because if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. Grab your espresso while you can still afford it. Let's start with wound number 1. Wound 1? The German engine dies. For 70 years, Germany was the economic heart of Europe. And the heart of Germany was industry. Cars, chemicals, machinery, the stuff that makes the world work. The German model was brilliant and cynical. Use American military protection to stay safe. Use Chinese demand to sell products. Use cheap Russian gas to power the factories. It worked perfectly, until it didn't. Let's talk about BASF, the largest chemical company on Earth. They make the chemicals in your toothpaste, your phone, your car, your medicine. Their facility in Germany is a city within a city. In 2024, BASF announced they're shutting down major production in Germany and spending $10 billion to build a mega complex in China. Why? Because German electricity costs make manufacturing mathematically impossible. Thanks to the loss of Russian gas and a botched transition to green energy, German electricity costs 3 times what it costs in America or China. You cannot compete when your power bill is tripled your competitors. It doesn't matter how skilled your workers are. The math doesn't work. And here's the dark comedy. Germany shut down its last 3 nuclear plants in April 2023. At the height of an energy crisis, they turned off clean, reliable power. So what did they replace it with? Coal. They're literally tearing down villages to mine brown coal, the dirtiest fuel on Earth, to replace the nuclear plants they closed to save the environment. You cannot make this stuff up. German industrial production in late 2024 hit its lowest level since the COVID lockdowns. Factories are closing. Companies are moving to America or China. The economic engine of Europe is stalling. And without Germany, the whole continent sinks. Wound 2. The baby bust. If closing factories is a heart attack, this is cancer. Slower but 100% fatal if untreated. Italy's birth rate just hit 1.18 children per woman. You need to 0.1 just to replace the population. Anything below 1.5 is considered a demographic emergency. At 1.18, you're looking at mathematical extinction. Let me introduce you to Matteo. He's 25. He has a university degree but can't find a job because the economy is frozen. He lives with his parents because rent costs more than he makes. And here's the problem. The Italian government expects Matteo to pay for the pensions of millions of retirees above him. European pension systems are pay-as-you-go. There's no vault of money. Grandma's pension this month comes directly from Matteo's paycheck this month. In the 1960s, there were 4 workers for every retiree. Easy. By 2050, there will be fewer than 2 workers per retiree in Italy and Spain. Do the math. 2 people paying full living expenses, health care, and pensions for 1 person, plus their own costs, plus taxes to run the government. What happens? Taxas explode. So what does Matteo do? He leaves, goes to America or Australia or Switzerland. This creates a death spiral. Young people leave. Tax base shrinks. Government raises taxes on remaining young people. More leave. The spiral accelerates. In 2024, Italy had fewer than 370,000 births, the lowest since the country unified in 1861. And the politics make it impossible to fix. Old people vote. Young people don't. If a politician says cut pensions to save the economy, they lose in a landslide. If they say bring in millions of immigrants to fix the ratio, they trigger cultural backlash and lose. So they do nothing. Borrow money? Kick the can? Until the road ends. And we're reaching the cliff. Quick question for the comments. If you were Matteo, would you stay and pay 60% taxes or leave? Let me know. Wound 3. Regulatory strangulation. Europe loves rules. The EU has regulated everything. GDPR for data, the AI Act for artificial intelligence, Digital Markets Act for tech companies. Sounds good in theory. In practice, it suffocates innovation. Here's the test. Name a European tech giant. Go ahead. I'll wait. Spotify. Swedish but had to list in New York to grow. SAP. Good but not a consumer brand. That's it. Europe has 500 million people and 0 companies that compete with Google, Amazon, Apple, Meta, or Microsoft. Why? Because when you're a startup in Europe, you spend half your time and money on compliance instead of building products. American companies move fast and break things. European companies move slow and fill out forms. By the time a European startup gets regulatory approval for a new feature, the American version has already captured the market. The brain drain is real. European engineers move to Silicon Valley because that's where the opportunities are. European venture capital is a fraction of American VC, and the few successful European companies go public in New York, not Frankfurt or Paris. ARM Holdings, the British chip designer, listed in New York. Spotify, New York BioNTech, who made the Pfizer vaccine. German company trades on NASDAQ. Europe is training talent then exporting it to America, where it creates value that flows back to American investors. It's economic suicide. Wound 4. Capital flight. This connects to Wound 3. Money follows returns. And European returns are pathetic. Since 2008, the S&P 500 returned over 300%. European markets? Maybe 50%? If you're an investor, where do you put your money? Exactly. Even the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the biggest pile of money in Europe built on oil, invests most of its equity portfolio in the United States. Europe is funding its own decline by sending savings to America to fuel American growth, which then sells products back to Europe. It's financial cuckoldry on a continental scale. European pension funds invest in American stocks because European stocks don't grow. European entrepreneurs list in New York because European markets don't value innovation. This creates a doom loop. Less capital in Europe means less growth. Less growth means even less capital. And the gap with America widens every year. I want to know, if you had $100,000, would you invest in the S&P 500 or the European DAX index? Be honest. Put it in the comments. Wound 5. Energy suicide. Energy is the master resource. If energy is cheap, life is good. If energy is expensive, life is hard. Europe decided to make life as hard as possible. The European green transition strategy was this: shut down nuclear plants, ban fracking, build wind and solar, and use cheap Russian gas as backup when renewables don't produce. See the flaw? Step 4 required Vladimir Putin to be a reliable partner. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the whole plan collapsed. European energy prices spiked to 10 times American levels, while American factories enjoyed cheap domestic natural gas thanks to fracking. European factories paid ransom prices for imported LNG in 2023 and 2024. European industry paid 3 to 4 times more for electricity than competitors in America and China. You cannot compete with that. It's not about worker productivity. When your electricity costs 4 times more, you lose. Period. And it's not just factories. It's families. In Britain and Germany, energy poverty is real. People choosing between heating and eating. The European grid is now unstable. Because they invested heavily in intermittent renewables, without enough storage, electricity prices swing wildly. -1 hour when it's windy. Sky high the next when it's not. This volatility makes planning impossible for businesses. Europe bet everything on a world where trade is free and Russia is friendly. That world is gone. The power plants are shut down, and while Europe cuts emissions by a fraction of a percent, China builds 2 new coal plants every week. Europe is sacrificing its economy for symbolic environmental gestures that change nothing globally. Wound 6. The Defense Awakening. For 75 years, Europe lived under American protection. The deal was simple. America provides security through NATO. Europe spends money on social welfare instead of defense. It was a great deal. Europe didn't buy aircraft carriers or stealth bombers. They bought universal health care, 6 weeks vacation, and generous pensions. They bought butter because America bought guns. Almost no NATO member met the 2% of GDP defense spending target. Germany's military became a joke. Soldiers used broomsticks in exercises because they didn't have enough rifles. But now war is back, and Europe has gutted its military-industrial base. Here's a terrifying fact. In a high-intensity conflict, the British Army would run out of ammunition in 2 days. 2 days. Now, Europe is scrambling to re-arm. But money for tanks is money, not for hospitals. Money for artillery is money, not for pensions. Europe is realizing social democracy is expensive, but safety is even more expensive. And for the first time in 3 generations, they have to pay for both. Can they afford it? With a stagnant economy, a shrinking workforce, and no tech sector, the math doesn't look good. The 2 futures. Europe has 2 possible futures. Future A is Renaissance. They wake up, cut red tape, embrace nuclear power, incentivize families, build capital markets that rival Wall Street. It's painful. It requires sacrifice, but it saves the continent. Future B is the museum. The path they're on now, Europe becomes a beautiful retirement home. Rich tourists visit the Colosseum and Eiffel Tower, stay in American-owned hotels, eat African-imported food, served by an immigrant while the native population slowly fades. It's a comfortable decline. The lights don't go out. The trains just run slower. Hospitals get more crowded. Taxes get higher. Until one day the party is over. There's a lesson here. Success is not permanent. Europe spent 500 years building the greatest civilization in history. 30 years of complacency threw it away. If it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. The math doesn't care about our feelings. Europe is dying, not because of war or plague, because of choices. 6 fatal wounds, self-inflicted, and unless something radical changes. The museum is coming. If you made it this far, let me know your thoughts. And if you want to understand how America pulled ahead while Europe fell behind, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.